It was a normal, if foggy, day in the village. Birds sang their usual songs, children played on the old familiar playground, and, as always, the ghosts watched from above. They didn't only watch from above. They walked the streets, they communicated their thoughts in their own ghostly ways, and they generally went about their afterlives as though they were still alive. It just so happens that above was the most convenient place from which a ghost can watch. And so, above was where they tended to congregate. In the village, ghosts were, of course, quite normal. However, on normal days, abnormal things often occur. It just so happens that abnormal things happen with such regularity that when they occur in small enough amounts, a day can still fall under the category of normal. On this day in particular, everything was normal for most, but, by chance, quite abnormal for one particular mother. Her son was hit by a bus. The bus driver apologized profusely. He stepped on the brakes as soon as he could. He simply hadn't seen the boy. A ghost had swooped down in front of the windshield, distracting the driver, thus causing the horrible accident to occur. The ghost was not available for comment at the moment. It had gone back to watching from above. Despite the best efforts of the bus driver, he couldn't identify which watching ghost was the culprit. Ghosts do have some defining features, such as slightly different hues of silvery blue radiance, or slight differences in body shape, although bodies would be a quite inaccurate term for a ghost's form. Sadly for the bus driver, he was not an expert in the field of ghost recognition, and so had to comfort the mother in other ways as they waited for the ambulance to arrive. The boy turned out to be fine. He died, but he was fine. Ghosts tended to be fine, at least as best as anyone could tell. They couldn't speak, as they didn't have mouths. They had the rather peculiar ability to project feelings and vague ideas directly into the minds of the people around them. Often, they project a feeling of serene calm. Most people assume that this must be how the ghosts feel most of the time, which is as good of a guess as any. This is why death in the village is treated as more of a mild annoyance than a true tragedy. How could anyone be upset at transitioning into a state of being that consisted largely of pure serenity? Even knowing that her son was fine, the mother grieved. She knew it was foolish. Her son was most likely happier now than he would have been while alive. The first few years of life tend to be, on average, quite nice. Her son was too young to understand the real horrors of the world, and now he never would. Part of her, some might say the sane part, thought that her son would be better off this way. When she left the hospital, she was sad, quite sad indeed. She saw the normal ghosts in the normal sky watching as always. As she unlocked her car door, she looked up again and watched as a bird flew through one of their incorporeal forms. That was slightly abnormal. However, it wasn't abnormal enough to factor against the overall normalness of the day. As she drove home, a strange thing happened. Her sadness slowly morphed into anger as the events of the day settled into place within her mind. She wasn't angry at the bus driver, no. If anything, she felt sorry for him to be caught in the middle of all this. One small part of her anger was directed at herself, though she knew this was irrational and therefore did her best to ignore it. The vast majority of her anger was directed at the ghost that had swooped down from its place above for the sole purpose of distracting that poor man behind the wheel of the bus. She knew that ghost. By the time she arrived at her house, the fog had lifted and the sun was shining. For most of the population of the village, this added to the normalcy of the day. For the mother, this noted improvement in weather meant nearly nothing, for she was still quite angry. One might even say enraged. She got out of her car angrily, opened the front door angrily, and walked inside angrily. She then proceeded to angrily make a cup of tea, angrily rotate a chair so that it faced a wall, and angrily sit in it. This behavior was quite abnormal, but not so abnormal considering the day she was already having. For while this day was largely normal in the village, it was anything but normal for her. The wall she pointed her chair at seemed to be as identical as a wall can be to all the other walls in the house. It had slightly faded blue-lined wallpaper, wooden trim painted white, and more than a few stains from various food items. These stains were almost exclusively the work of the woman's now-dead child. However, this wall did have one thing that set it apart from all the other walls in the house. It was her husband's favorite wall. She didn't know why it was his favorite. He never expressed any particular fondness for it while alive, but after his death, he seemed to be drawn to it. Every evening when he was done being above for the day, he came floating through that exact wall to see his wife and, until recently, his son. This was why the mother sat in front of that particular wall. She was waiting for the return of her dead husband. An hour passed, more or less, before he came home. Returning home was something dead family members did often in the village. It was, in fact, quite normal. He came floating through the wall just like he did every night. His form hadn't changed. Ghosts don't often do. He was a blob of spirituality slightly shorter than average, with a faint green tint to the shimmering silvery blue glow that consistently radiated from his core. The main difference tonight was the secondary floating glowing shape next to him. Much smaller and slightly less green, though not entirely ungreen. This was, of course, the ghost's son. The mother stared directly into the heart of the larger of the two ghosts. Heart, of course, meaning center, as ghosts tended not to have hearts in the biological sense. Without blood, there was no need for one. As the woman continued to stare into the core of the larger ethereal being, the smaller of the two floated through the ceiling and into his bedroom. He was getting used to floating through things. It was actually quite fun, he decided. Below, he heard his mother yell something at his father. He couldn't make out the exact words and didn't want to. But despite his best efforts, he gathered the general idea of what was being said. She was mad at his father for killing him. That was stupid, the boy decided. He didn't kill me, the bus did. And he couldn't be mad about that now, after seeing how sorry the poor bus driver was. How could anyone be upset right now, he wondered. Being a ghost is fun. Through the floor below, the boy could feel his father project a feeling. That was a skill he would need to learn at some point. Right now, he could only project the most basic forms of feelings. Happy, sad, angry, and of course, that calm serenity he had heard the adults talk about so often. But at that moment, he felt an entire idea come up from the floor below. It was something to the effect of, things are better now. We're one step closer to being together again. Of course, none of those exact words were part of the projection. It was rather a carefully selected assortment of feelings, chosen to encapsulate the same meaning as the sentences his father wished to speak. The argument went on for a short time. The boy, meanwhile, was enjoying his newfound ghosthood. He sat inside a wall just because he could. He projected his feelings at an ant he found in the corner of his room. It sped up when he made it happier and slowed down when he made it sad. He was thoroughly enjoying being a ghost. Calm serenity was exactly as nice as they said it would be. Without much warning, the boy felt another feeling being projected through the floor. This one was a mix of questioning, longing, determination, and several other things that the boy was having a difficult time piecing together. He would figure it out in time. He had forever in which to do so. But while he didn't understand everything that went into the feeling, he still managed to understand the general meaning of what his father was trying to say. He was saying, "Why don't you join us?" And so, his mother became a ghost. After all, why not?